Right. Welcome to Apollos Project Apologetics. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching this video, and there's no us, I guess it's just me. Well, no, there's an us, there's a cat. I wanted to address today a somewhat typical argument against the deity of Jesus, and that is the common objection that Jesus did not claim to be God, but claimed only to be the Son of God. Now, I'm going to try to deal with that, but first I wanted to say that, well, there's a lot presupposed in the statement that Jesus never claimed to be God, because there's a lot presupposed in the idea of what a claim to be God means and looks like, as well as the fact that, but anyway, we'll move on. The point here is what Jesus's sonship means. Now, being the term or title being a son of God does not necessarily in every case indicate deity, but we will see in key points that rather than this being an objection to the deity of Christ, it's rather a really strong affirmation of the deity of Christ. And so I wanted to just start with one scripture, and then we'll get into the argument here of what it means of Jesus being the Son of God, and in what senses, plural, he is the Son of God. But let me just read a quote from Mark 14. This is when Jesus is arrested and is standing before the Jewish leaders of the Sanhedrin. And this is what they finally get Jesus on after he's arrested. And it starts in Mark 14, verse 60. It says, "The high priest stood up and came forward and questioned Jesus, saying, 'Do you not answer? What is it that these men are testifying against you?' But he kept silent and did not answer. Again, the high priest was questioning him, saying, 'Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?' And Jesus said, 'I am, and you shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven.' Tearing his clothes, the high priest said, 'What further need do we have of witnesses? You have heard the blasphemy. How does it seem to you?' And they all condemned him to be deserving of death." Okay. Now, Mark is often wrongly presupposed to have what's called the lowest Christology, meaning it's assumed that Mark is written the earliest and has the least developed views of Jesus, and that other elements are added in later. But Mark affirms the deity of Christ in several places. But here I want to note particularly that when Jesus answers, he's being asked, "Are you the Christ?" which people could claim to be the Messiah. There could be false claimants, but that wouldn't be blasphemy. But it's, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" Now, Jesus answers and says in Mark 14:62, he says first, "I am," which I think is an I am statement, ego, I, me, which is not just in John. So he affirms himself to be the Son of the Blessed One, the Son of God. And I believe this means he is affirming that he is the Son of God by nature. And then he also says, "And you shall see the Son of Man," affirming or bringing in the language of Daniel 7, he says, you shall see the Son of Man at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven is Daniel 7, which I believe also indicates that the one like a son of man who receives all nations, tribes, and languages bow before him and worship or serve him, which is a term for deity. So is the idea of arriving on the clouds. Only God arrives on the clouds in the Old Testament. And then he says he brings in the language also of Psalm 110, verse 1. The Lord says to my Lord, or Yahweh says to my Adonai, as David writes, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. So he says, come on the clouds of heaven at the right hand of power of God. And to be seated at God's right hand, to share his throne or his seat, is to be equal in dignity. Now, the reaction is also significant because Jesus putting these scriptures together in the affirmation that he does claim to be the Son of God, the Son of the Blessed One, elicits the cries of blasphemy. This can be read in Matthew and Luke as well. Now, we'll go back to this type of thing, but I want to talk about the different senses in which Son of God, the title, can be used. Because a lot of times people think that they have found a chink in the armor in the doctrine of the deity of Christ because they say, see, look, Jesus just says he's the Son of God. He doesn't say that he is God or worship me or all these other things. But in Jesus's affirmations, I think it is heavily implied and actually required by the context of certain passages that that Jesus is God the Son, God in the flesh, and that he shares equality with the Father of status and nature. Now, before I get to demonstrating that, we have to look at the biblical data and see the ways in which Son of God is used. Now, it is true, and there's no reason to shy away from this, that Son of God is used in different ways in the scriptures. And there are basically four different ways the Son of God terminology is used. And most of them don't point to or require deity. Okay, so I admit that. So one of them is that humans are considered the sons of God by creation. In Luke 3:38, Adam is called Son of God. Comes from God. He's created by God. Paul, quoting a pagan poet in his message on Mars Hill to the Athenians, quotes and says, as even some of your poets say, we are his children or his offspring. Okay. Now, the Bible itself qualifies this because even though it uses this language, and I think Malachi 2:10 also says, are they not all from one Father? The Bible qualifies this language pretty particularly in the sense that not all humans in a saving sense, while they are the children of God by creation, not all humans are the son and children of God in saving terms. In fact, the Bible makes a careful distinction between believers and unbelievers, that believers have become the children of God by adoption and grace. Now I'll get into that. And they are sons of God in a true relational sense, not just by creation. Okay? So another one besides creation is angels. Angels are sometimes called sons of God. This is in Job 1:6 and also Job 38:7, where the sons of God present themselves before God in Job 1 and answer before him. So angels and even Satan and the demons are in that category of created angelic beings. And then God is speaking to Job in Job 38:7 and talks about, Job, where were you when I created and the sons of God shouted for joy? So the angels worshiping at God's creation. Arguably also in Genesis 6, depending on how the sons of God in Genesis 6 is taken, whether the offspring of Seth or the product of angelic / demonic forces in human bodies mating with the bodies of women and producing angelic sons of God, or something of that nature. If it's angels there in Genesis 6 in human form, trying to pervert God's creation by mating with human women, they might be angels there. If not, it falls into the same category as created people who are created by God. Another category is God's covenant or adopted son. And we see this in terms of Israel, or in the Davidic / Messianic kings. So Israel is called in Exodus 4:22. God says Israel, the nation that he's going to create from the descendants of Abraham that are in Egypt and that are going to be created through the Exodus event. God says in Exodus 4:22, Israel is my son, my firstborn. So Israel is a collective, but is referred to as God's son. And then also similarly, because the king comes to represent the people as an individual, represents their corporate identity, God identifies the Davidic kings. The kings started really with David. Started with Saul, but David becomes the prototype for Israel's ideal king and the true kingly line that God identifies David as the Davidic king and the Davidic kings in his line, including the Messiah, as his sons. So this can be read in 2 Samuel 7 in the Davidic covenant. It says, I will be a father to him. He will be a son to me. It's also in places like Psalm 2, where God says to the Davidic king, as David writes this, he says, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. That he's speaking to the king. He, in a messianic psalm, claims ownership over the king as his son and heir and lord of creation. This is also in places like Psalm 89, 27, where the king is likewise called the son and the firstborn. And that language gets fairly exalted as it points forward to the messianic king, the ultimate king in David's line, the Messiah. We'll come back to that hopefully at some point, but God allows in the Psalms fairly exalted language, even worshipful language, to be used of the messianic king, ultimately represented in the Messiah. And so there's that aspect as well, sons by covenant adoption. Now, in the New Testament, in the New Covenant, as I mentioned before, not all human beings are the children of God. And so John 1:12, as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believe in his name. Verse 13, those who were born not of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, or were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. That those who are born from above, that God causes them through the Holy Spirit, after hearing the preaching of the gospel, to recognize Christ for who he is, to receive him, to believe in his name, and that they are born again or born from above into God's family. They are adopted, Ephesians 1, where God adopts us through Jesus Christ to himself. And so we are sons of God by adoption and grace. And so this is how Jesus talks about believers. For example, in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, "Blessed are the peacemakers," Matthew 5:9, "for they shall be called sons of God." He also talks about the sons of God representing God in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5:44 and following. Okay, so there are sons by adoption and grace. Romans 8 talks about this, that we have received the spirit of adoption, Romans 8:14 through 17. Galatians 4 talks about that because we are sons, he has sent forth the spirit of his son by which we cry, Abba, Father. So because God has adopted us as sons, we are his sons, his heirs, co-heirs with Christ, united with his son. We are, God sends forth the spirit of his son into believers, and it's by that spirit that we recognize God as our Father. Okay, so our Father who is in heaven, right? But that is not the same type of sonship that Jesus has. We become sons because we are united with God's true son, God's unique son. As Romans 8:29 talks about, that we are conformed to the image of his son. Okay, so Jesus is uniquely and eternally the Son of God. He's not the Son of God by creation. He's not the Son of God by adoption. He's not the Son of God just because he's fulfilling an office. He is the Son of God by nature. That Jesus is uniquely the Son of God. And when we say Son of God in the scriptures referring to Jesus, now there are different senses in which Jesus is called the Son of God, which is important. But what it often indicates is not that there was temporally first in time a Father, God the Father, and then the creation of God the Son. What is being referred to in the scriptures when Jesus is called the Son of God many times is that Jesus shares nature an identity uniquely with God. That being the Son of God he is the Son who shares essence. To be the son of something means this, or someone means that you share essence, identity, being, and nature. Now, it doesn't always mean that in every context, but there are some key contexts in which it absolutely does mean that. And so we'll look at just a few of these places in which that's the case. Now, let's turn to John, which all of these references are not going to be from John, by the way, but there are some key references in John. And let's talk about one of the most famous phrases, because it's from the Bible's most famous verse. Jesus is the only begotten Son of God. This is the word monogenes in Greek. Now, only begotten is an older translation that has come to in English to communicate something that the text or the word is not communicating. Only begotten seems to communicate in English that there was a time when the Son did not exist, but that he was begotten, created by the Father, and came to exist, or that Jesus became the Son of God. Now, some people will argue that Jesus was always God, but that he became the Son. I don't think the Bible teaches that. I think the Bible teaches that Jesus eternally pre-existed in a relationship of sonship to the Father, though without a beginning. Now you say, okay, well, how can you have a son and a father? Isn't a father logically and temporally prior to a son? In human relationships, yes. My father had to exist before me, before I existed. But the biblical terminology of father and son is not referring to time and when a being came into existence, but referring to nature and relationship. So when I am focusing in on monogenes, only begotten, is because this word indicates not that Jesus was begotten, created as the Son of God at a point in time, but that he is unique or one of a kind. That this word monogenes that we translate or read as only begotten really means the only one of his kind. That rather than monogenes, generated, meaning not first generated, it's mono, one, or only, genes, or something we'd think of like genus, the one of its being. And so John, in John 1:18, writes, depending on how this verse is taken, it can mean only begotten Son or only begotten God. John, in John 1:18, after talking about the Word that was with God, eternally with God, and was God as to his nature, deity, and the Word became flesh, that temporally took place in time, and displayed God's glory. That it says in John 1:18, no one has seen God at any time. The only begotten God, the monogenes, the unique, the one of a kind God who is in the bosom of the Father, has explained him. And so I remember there was a young Sheldon episode where Sheldon is a young skeptic who questions his dumb Bible-believing preacher who thinks and preaches uncritically. And this verse is read, no one has seen God at any time. And young Sheldon wants to raise his hand. He whispers to his grandma, but doesn't it say in Genesis that Jacob wrestled with God? And you might cite some other places where God is seen in human form. And the grandma goes, Sheldon has a question. And the assumption is, of course, this minister would have no answer. And then the further assumption is that the Bible has no answer. But what this would indicate, and Sheldon's question is a good one, is that, yes, no one has seen all that God is at any time, but God has been seen in human form in the Old Testament, hasn't he? Yahweh is in flesh speaking with Abraham at the oaks of Mamre. And there are other times, Genesis 32, Jacob wrestles with a man and then says that he names the place Peniel because he's seen the face of God. I think what John is indicating here is that the one who has always revealed God and made him known, who has shown up and been seen as God, who speaks and acts as God, is now revealed as the Word, God's eternal Son, the unique God who is in relationship with God himself, who eternally was with God and was God, and that he makes God uniquely known. As Hebrews 1 will talk about, he is the character stamp of God's nature and the brightness of his glory, that in the flesh of Jesus, you have the impress of all that God is. And he is the Son of God because he shares nature and being with God. Now, we don't want to just take my word for it. Let's go ahead to John 5, verses 17 and 18. John 5, where Jesus has healed a man on the Sabbath. John 5:17 says, after Jesus is confronted, I'll start in verse 16. For this reason, the Jews were persecuting Jesus because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But he answered them, my Father is working until now, and I myself am working. Now, that may not seem like a big deal to us, but Jesus calls God my Father, which we're told to call God our Father in the disciples' prayer. But Jesus says, my Father is working, and I myself am working. In other words, Jesus is claiming to do the same things as the Father, to have the same prerogatives as the Father. And now let me read the following text from Jesus. It says, or from their reaction and Jesus's reaction to their reaction. John 5:18. For this reason, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because he not only was breaking the Sabbath, but also was calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. Now, note, this is John's description and editorial, that he doesn't say they misunderstood Jesus, which John does say when it happens, but he says that Jesus was calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. And then Jesus will go on to say in John 5, 22 and 23 says, "For not even the Father judges anyone, but he has given all judgment to the Son, so that all will honor / worship the Son, even as they honor the Father. He who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him." In other words, Jesus shares the same honor, the same worship, to the point that whoever does not honor and worship the Son of God does not honor truly God who sent him. Okay, so Jesus is claiming to be the Son of God by nature. Jesus is referring to himself in a unique way, in a unique position. Jesus also will go on to say in John 10:30, he will say, "I and the Father, we are one," which is a awkward reading, but that's what the grammar is getting at. There's still a distinction between Jesus and the Father. I and the Father are, not is, one. So Jesus claims a unique oneness with the Father. And then we'll say they accuse him of blasphemy. And he says, "You, being a man, make yourself out to be God." Then Jesus confronts them with Psalm 82, which is about unjust judges standing in the place of God, who are called Elohim, who are called gods, not in the, which is still in the context of monotheism, but they are representing these powers. And Jesus says that, "Why do you then say of the one who God has sanctified and sent into the world, you are blaspheming, because I said I am the Son of God," in John 10:36. And so Jesus, in the same context, ties together "I and the Father are one" with being the Son of God in a unique sense. He also, in John 14, says to Philip, when Philip said to him in John 14:8, he said, Philip said to him, "Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us." Jesus said to him, "Have I been with you so long, and yet you have not come to know me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'?" Now, Jesus is not claiming here to be the Father, but he's saying, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. If you have seen the Son, you have seen the Father. If you see God in the flesh, it is as good as seeing God. You cannot do better than seeing Jesus in the flesh if you want to know what God looks like. John 14:10, "Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me?" See, there's still distinction between the Father and the Son. "The words that I say, I do not speak on my own initiative, but the Father abiding in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. Otherwise, believe me because of the works themselves." Okay, so Jesus distinguishes himself from the Father. However, he says, "He who has seen me, has seen the Son, has seen the Father." Now, I talked about the charges of blasphemy, which we can look at. Let's go back to not just John, but let's look at the Synoptic Gospels. Jesus in Matthew 27, just getting to the right point here. No, this is not good radio. Excuse me, 26. Matthew 26:62. The high priest stood up and said to him, "Do you not answer? What is it that these men are testifying against you?" But Jesus kept silent, and the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God that you tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus said to them, "You have said it yourself," which is a idiomatic way of saying, "You said it. That's exactly what I'm saying," or "It is as you say." Mark adds in Jesus says, "I am. Nevertheless, I tell you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power," Daniel 7, Psalm 110:1, and coming on the clouds of heaven. The high priest tore his robes. He has blasphemed. What further need do we have of witnesses? Behold, you have now heard the blasphemy. And what do you think? They said, he deserves death. Okay, so Jesus is calls himself the Son of God. He puts it in the context of Daniel 7, a divine figure, of Psalm 110:1, a divine figure, and he is accused of blasphemy for the claim to be the Son of God. Now, Jesus in Luke, we already looked at Mark fairly extensively, but Jesus in Luke 22:66, the council of elders, when it was day, the council of elders of the people assembled, both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council chamber, saying, "If you are the Christ, tell us." But he said to them, "If I tell you, you will not believe, and if I ask a question, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God." And they said to him, "Are you the Son of God then?" And he said to them, "Yes, I am." And they said, then they said, "What further need do we have of testimony? We have heard ourselves from his own mouth." So there we don't have the statement about blasphemy, but we see the same affirmation of the claim by Jesus and the same result. Flipping back to John 19:7, when the Jews are talking to Pilate, it says, "The Jews answered him and said, 'We have a law, and by that law he ought to die because he made himself out to be the Son of God.'" So their claim is he was claiming to be the Son of God. Okay. Now, a few more things. I want to go back before I go to Hebrews. I want to look at Mark 1 and see what is said about Jesus in the first couple of verses. Okay. It says, Mark 1:1, and I'll go through verse 3, says, "Behold, the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God." That's Mark 1:1. Now, that may not seem super significant, but if we understand this in the historical Greco-Roman context, it's important to keep in mind or be aware of the fact that a certain figure or figures was recognized as Lord, Kyrios, King and Lord, Soter, Savior, a son of a god or the gods, and by his appearing, his epiphany, he would bring good news, the gospel, the announcement of victory, euangelion. Now, that all sounds like Jesus language, and it is in the New Testament, but that was the language that was used of the Caesars just prior to Jesus's birth, namely Caesar Augustus, but also during and after. That there were inscriptions uh, written for the Caesars. One is called the Priene inscription, which basically says the good news, the gospel of Caesar Augustus, the son of the gods, calls him Kyrios, Lord. It calls him talks about his glorious appearing and the good news by his victory and peace that he brings. So in the Greco-Roman context, the Caesars were believed to be a son of Apollo or a son of the gods, a god, one of the gods residing on earth. Now, the Bible is monotheistic. It says that the Caesars are not gods, that there's only one true God, but it affirms that Jesus is the true Son of God, the true Kyrios, Lord, who brings the true gospel. Now, Mark begins his gospel purposefully this way, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, so that Jesus brings the true good news, not Caesar. He is the Christ, that he's the Messiah predicted in the Old Testament, and he is the Son of God. Now, in verse 2, it says, as it is written in Isaiah the prophet, behold, I send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make ready the way of Yahweh, make his paths straight. Now, this is a combination of scriptures. Obviously, Isaiah from Isaiah 40 talks about making a straight way for Yahweh's arrival, but also the language of the messenger comes from Malachi 3, and also arguably the one who goes ahead of God, the angel of Yahweh who speaks and acts as Yahweh from Exodus. I think it's Exodus 33. However, Mark is putting this together and says this is a prophecy fulfilled in John the Baptist and Jesus, that John the Baptist is the voice crying in the wilderness and preparing the way before the Lord. But he cites an Old Testament Yahweh text that says that the Lord who is coming is Yahweh. And so in Mark's theology, from the very first verses, where Jesus is the coming one, Jesus is introduced as the Son of God, whose coming is the coming of Yahweh, prepared by John the Baptist and described in Isaiah 40. So for Jesus to be Son of God means he is the Son of God by nature. Now, let me move to Hebrews chapter 1. Now, Hebrews 1 gives an indication of what it means that Jesus is the Son of God. And it ties together several strands of different concepts in which Jesus is the Son of God. and in which it shows he's qualitatively superior as the Son of God. And so Hebrews begins by talking about, let's just start in Hebrews 1:1. God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers in the prophets, in many portions and in many ways, in these last days, has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom he made the world. And he, the Son, is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by the word of his power. When he had made purification of sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become as much better than the angels as he inherited a more excellent name than they. Okay, so there's a lot there. Books can be and have been written on just this, but Hebrews is showing that there can't really be a higher position in what God accomplishes than God's unique Son, than the unique Son of God, Jesus. Okay, that he's the ultimate and final bringer of God's revelation. He's God's definitive revelation to man, where God speaks through him, that he is the king, he's the heir of all things. He is the one through whom he made the world, created and made the ages. All the ages of history are created through him. So he's the sovereign Lord of history. He is the radiance of God's glory, of the Father's glory. He's the reflection, the radiant. Now, some people say, oh, well, the reflection comes after the light. Well, this speaks to more of that he is the weight and the brightness of God's glory. He's the perfect representation of God's glory, not just a copy of it. And that he is the character stamp, the character in Greek, the exact representation of his nature, meaning that in the flesh of Jesus, the Son of God, we have the perfect impress of all that God is, as Colossians 2:9 talks about, that in him dwells the fullness of deity in bodily form. That he also is all powerful as the creator and sustainer. He upholds all things by the word of his power. And then after he made purification of sins, he sat down at the right hand of God, meaning a place of equal honor and dignity to God the Father. And because of that, remember I said that Son of God can be used of angels. Because of that, because of his nature and his work, Jesus, as the Son of God, as according to Hebrews 1:4, has become much better than the angels, as he has inherited a more excellent name than they. So I think the name or the title here is Son. Now you're saying, well, wait a second. I thought you were saying Jesus has eternally been the Son. Yes, but in Jesus coming into the world, from being the eternal pre-existent Son of God, who was with God and was God, that he is the radiance of his glory, he takes on flesh in his career, the fullness of God in bodily form, and accomplishes a unique work as God's Son, so that Jesus, the man, receives a more excellent name, title, status, and position than the angels. Now, what we see before is that angels were called Son of God, but Hebrews is proving Jesus is not a Son of God like the angels. He is qualitatively and positionally superior because of both his work that he accomplished and because of his eternal nature as God. Also, we said that humans are called sons of God. Adam is called a son of God, Luke 3:38. Jesus enters into humanity as the last Adam, that he takes on the sonship of Adam. We also mentioned that Israel is called God's son, and that representing Israel, the Davidic king, is also called God's son. Jesus takes on and embodies true Israel, and he is born as a descendant of David and takes on the role of Davidic king and Davidic sonship, such that God can treat or beget Jesus the man as his son, who is the messianic fulfillment of the Davidic line. So Jesus is better than the angels, and he takes on all these other categories of sonship, as well as being the eternal Son of God. And that's what Hebrews 1 indicates. Goes on in verse 5, it says, "For to which of the angels did he ever say," quote, this is from 2 Samuel 7, 13 and 14, this is from Psalm 2:7, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." And again, quote, so that was from Psalm 2, where God says to the Davidic son, not to the angels, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." So Jesus takes on the messianic son. And again, 2 Samuel 7, 14, "I will be a father to him, and he will be a son to me." Okay, so that's messianic sonship, but there's something even greater than that, because Hebrews goes on in Hebrews 1:6 to say, "And when he again brings the firstborn into the world," God again brings the son, the firstborn, into the world, meaning that title of unique rank, firstborn. God says, quote, "Let all the angels of God worship him." So the angels, the spiritual beings, are commanded to worship the Son. Now, that is not true of David, of Solomon, of other Davidic kings. So Jesus takes on that. Maybe take a call real quick. Hello. Hi, how are you doing? Good, good. Glad. Are you on your way home? Cool. Can can I call you back in just like 2 minutes? Sorry, I was just finishing up a video. In fact, you're on the video. No, it's fine. Don't be sorry. I'll call you back in just a minute. Okay, I love you. Okay, I've got something more important to do. Got to call my wife back. But the angels are told to worship the Son. The angels are ministers. God is saying that the Son is not his minister, he's the creator. And then exalted language is quoted from Psalm 45, where God says to the Davidic king, "Your throne, O God," or the Messiah, "your throne, O God, is forever and ever." Okay. So we notice through the Psalms, Psalm 2, that all are come to come and do homage, bow before, kiss, worship the Son. In Psalm 45, God says to the messianic king, "Your throne, O God, is forever and ever." Um, and then in Psalm 110:1, God says to the Messianic king, sit at my right hand till I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. This gets picked up further in Isaiah 9:6. Unto us a child will be given, unto us a child will be born, a son will be given, and he will be called Mighty God, Father of Eternity, Wonderful Counselor. Right? So the messianic language continues to get elevated regarding the Messiah to the point where it becomes worshipful and only appropriate for deity, to the point where it's when Jesus incarnates, it's finally appropriate to worship the Davidic king because he is God in the flesh. And Hebrews 1:10 talks about that it is said of him in Psalm 102 that he is the eternal creator, he is unchanging, unlike his creation, and that he is unique as creator. So, summing up, I've got to wrap up here. There's more to be said, but Son of God, when used of Jesus, can refer to his being a son of Adam. It can refer to his being a messianic Davidic king, can refer to his being true Israel. But behind that all is that he is the monogenes, the unique Son of God by nature. And instead of denying his deity, the term Son of God affirms that Jesus is equal with God.